we're going to provide real guidance on how to do this safely. And there are going to be some who react either in the short or the long term in different ways, but what we cannot do, what would be irresponsible from the state, is to not make recommendations that we know will help protect not just students, but think about the teachers, the bus drivers, and the rest, and we've already lost some of those. It is critical that the reopening plan isn't just about the kids. It's important to get them back in the classroom, but they're pretty resilient to COVID. But all the adults that are in that building or get them to that building deserve to be safe too. So I think we're going to start with Commissioner Brown. I got to tell you, Kevin has been doing a great job. When he took over the interim commissioner, he did not know it was going to be during COVID and some of the most challenging times for our school systems, but he has been a great partner, a great guiding voice to our educators, and we appreciate him. Commissioner.
Thank you, Governor, Lieutenant Governor Dr. Stack, and your team for your cooperation and expertise over the past few weeks and months to ensure that we have expectations on how we can not only reopen our schools, but strategies and expectations to ensure that our schools can stay open. Later, the Lieutenant Governor will be addressing some good news, some flexibility that she and the Governor are able to afford districts using the Governor's original emergency order issued in March. And that's related to school funding and attendance flexibility. If you can advance the slide, please. I've been waiting to be able to say that here. That's on my bucket list. And I'm going to, the Lieutenant Governor will explain the details of this, but this is a way that we are able to be flexible at the state level. And it's going to enable us to continue using non-traditional instruction in the 2020-2021 school year. And then it's also going to ensure continuity and predictability in education funding for that same school year. You can advance the next slide, please. The last time I was here with you, Governor, you sent me on my way and with the expectation that we would continue learning even though we were not going to be in in-person classes. And that was a very huge lift on the part of our schools and districts. And I'm pleased to say that we did that. We, being the entire Commonwealth, but our school community, our teachers, our families, but most importantly, our students and their parents, helping them with those assignments at home. On March 28th, the Wall Street Journal had a headline that talked about some other districts and schools around the country that were discontinuing remote instruction during that same time period because, and the quote said, it was too tough. It wasn't too tough for Kentucky. It was hard, but we did it. There were imperfections in the non-traditional instruction program, but from March to May, it was a heroic effort in the Commonwealth on the part of teachers, administrators, staff, and those students and families working at home to complete the 1,062 hours of instruction, and at the same time, our schools and districts and their partners in their communities serve millions of meals at over 2,000 sites. So now we're pivoting to reopening. And if you can advance to the next, if you actually go back, I'm sorry. These are the documents listed that we have issued at the Department of Education in cooperation with other state agencies such as the Department of Public Health and others to help guide districts. That initial document was issued on May 15th. It provided the initial guidance that districts needed to have conversations with their community about how they could reopen and the needs of that community. In Kentucky, we honor local control. We honor the flexibility that districts want and that they have to make the decisions that are best for their communities. I'm not going to read the other documents that we issued other than I want Kentucky to know that those documents are there, and they go into great detail in such areas as teaching and learning during a pandemic and addressing learning loss when our students come back. But now we're to June 24th, and you'll see that in bold there, that is what I'm referring to as our flagship document. That is the document that, in cooperation with public health and other state agencies that we are releasing today, that identifies the safety expectations and best practice guidelines for Kentucky schools. I call it the flagship document because the documents listed there and then the future documents that we will issue at KDE will rely on the guidance in this document. This is a public health crisis, and this is the major public health document with the expectations and best practices that our schools need in order to operate and reduce the risk of the spread of COVID-19. I can't say enough about the partnership between Department of Public Health, Education and Workforce Development, Cabinet, of course, the Governor and Lieutenant Governor, their staff, and then KY Stats. In this document, when you see it, you're going to see a lot of graphics. It's easy to understand for school districts. It's also a document that will be easy to understand by parents and communities, and that's key. KY Stats and their creative team over there, they're responsible for putting the document in that type of format. That type of format was based on feedback that we received from school districts several weeks ago, and that's a perfect example of how that document has changed over the last few weeks based on that feedback we're getting from our education partners. Next slide, please. As I indicated, the guidance is divided into safety expectations and best practices. So expectations being things that districts and schools must do to reduce the risk of COVID-19 in order to operate. Of course, best practices are those things we would love to see them do. They will not be required to do, but we hope that they do so if they are able to do so using their resources. And we ask, why are we issuing this document? Why is it divided into expectations and best practices? It's obviously so we can reopen. Most importantly, it's so we can stay open. And we need to make sure that we are keeping our students, staff, and community safe and reducing the risk of the spread of COVID-19. I'm going to briefly go over the 5 areas that are listed there. Those 5 areas with the 5 bullet points. That is how this document is divided. And so, since March, we've been having weekly superintendent webcasts. Those webcasts are widely available. You can watch those online. I think the one we had yesterday, we had over 500 individuals logging into that webcast. We don't have 500 superintendents. We have 172. And my point is, most of the information in this reopening document, it is not new information. These are things we've talked about. You've heard the governor talk about, the lieutenant governor, Dr. Stack, and I'm going to briefly go over them. Under social distancing, there will be a 6 feet social distancing requirement in our classrooms. However, and due to the work and the cooperation of public health, there's some leniency there and some exceptions. If districts are unable to have that 6 feet distancing in a classroom, and when you start adding that up, that adds up quickly, and it greatly reduces the capacity of the classroom. Students will be able to be seated closer together, but masks will be required. So if you're seated closer than 6 feet, you've got to have a mask on during your instruction. If you're in a classroom and you have that 6 feet social distancing around your desk, your mask can come down while you're seated. However, as one of our superintendents said, a good thing to remember in our schools and just in our society in general, that when you move, you mask. That's going to be the same rule in our schools. This is going to result in cases of recommended smaller class sizes. Obviously, spacing students out in hallways. Districts will be asked to put tape every 6 feet, just like you are seeing now in our shops and restaurants. And also, of course, limited assemblies. Any type of assembly must follow, of course, the governor's recommendations on public gatherings. The next issue are the issue of personal protective equipment and masks. This may be, unfortunately, one of the most controversial items that you're certainly hearing a lot of discussion about that out on social media in our society. Again, if a student is moving, they need to have a mask on. If they're less than 6 feet, they need to have a mask on. When they're on a bus, they need to have a mask on. Another example of how our public health really listening to some of the concerns of our school district about getting on a school bus. We obviously know in Kentucky we don't have extra education funding or any funding for that matter. and we really need to be cautious on how we spend that. And so districts were concerned about the having to maybe run additional bus routes. And so we're going to be able to fully load our buses so long as certain conditions are met. One of those will be wearing a mask. One of those will either be a temperature check upon entry to the bus or a parental assurance to the school district that the child, when presented to get on the school bus, does not have a temperature of over 100.4. However, when those students arrive at school, all students will need to be screened for a temperature check. Screening. You've heard Dr. Stack talk about this before, and the document will go into the various screening requirements and items that will indicate when a student needs to stay home or be sent home. And those, of course, are a temperature of greater than 100.4 and or a cough and or vomiting or diarrhea and or a new rash and or exposure to a COVID-19 case within 48 hours. Sanitation and environment factors, those are self-explanatory guidance on how school districts need to clean the schools, clean buses, signage. We've been working with KY Stats. And the governor has an example of a poster that we will be sending to our school districts. KY Stats did a great job. We will be including those in all of our school buildings. We'll also be doing another poster that is more age appropriate for our high school students. And then finally, contact tracing. Districts will be cooperating with the local health departments in case there is a COVID-19 case in that school. The local health departments and contact tracers will need to look at bus manifests. We'll need to determine where Kevin was sitting on the bus. What is the seating chart in the classroom to determine whether or not I inadvertently exposed someone in the cafeteria or in the classroom or on the bus. And you may ask, how are we going to do this? And it seems like a huge lift, and it is a huge lift. We're going to do it the same way we did it last semester. And I believe that we have the best teachers, administrators, and staff in the country. I know this because I'm a Kentuckian, and all of us Kentuckians, we of course are biased about Kentucky, but I also have facts on my side. And seeing what I saw in our school districts, all 172 of them, what they did last semester, even though it was imperfect and even though non-traditional instruction is imperfect, what they did and how they did it tells me that they will be doing this and they will be meeting these expectations because they know that's the best thing for their students. I have a great example of a video here that is an example of what we want our educational partners to do. And one of our education partners is the Kentucky Education Development Corporation. They are an education cooperative. And without prompting from me, a few hours ago, I received this video from their executive director. And we need to see this type of video from other media outlets and other organizations across the state. If you could please play the video. This is a mass campaign from the Kentucky Education Development Corporation. I challenge all other cooperatives, other partner organizations, the media, famous Kentuckians, athletes. We need your help. We need to be modeling this. We need to be modeling social distancing, healthy at home, healthy at work, model wearing face coverings and masks. Thank you, KEDC, for that. And I'm looking forward to seeing all the other creative ways that we're going to get this message across Kentucky. If you could advance to the next slide, please. I mentioned earlier, we do have additional KDE guidance. Upon release of the document today, we're not just going to say, good luck, schools and districts, you're on your own. This is just part of the process. This document will become the flagship document as I referenced. However, we will be adding additional guidance from the department in consultation with all the other state agency partners on pupil transportation, workplace health and safety, and facilities and logistics, and then career and technical education. So when you see the document that's released today, you may see only a half a page dedicated to sanitation on a school bus, for example. That doesn't mean that's the only guidance we're giving schools on how to sanitize a bus. Those are the expectations from public health at a very high level. And then you're going to see that we're going to layer in this pupil transportation guidance document tomorrow that will be right in line with the document we issue today, but it will go into much more detail on how schools and districts need to address pupil transportation, sanitation. If districts were to have a monitor on the bus and the monitor was able to take temperatures as students arrive on the bus, which is certainly a best practice instead of waiting till school, how that would occur. So we're going to continue to be providing that guidance. We're going to continue our education continuation task force. So the Lieutenant Governor is a member. We have over 40 members from the education community on that task force, including 4 members of the General Assembly. And I made a decision to continue all education advisory groups that the Commissioner has to advise me and then the new Commissioner that's coming on throughout the rest of the summer. Normally we take the summers off. And we're going to also bring our student advisory group back. They will have 17 new members, and we hope to bring them back virtually in July. We really want to hear from our students. We had 3 student advisory meetings, and I have to say they are a tougher group than the superintendents, and both offered excellent feedback as we've dealt with this pandemic. Next slide, please. Again, I want to reemphasize, and to everyone listening, why is this important? Why is it important we have these expectations? Why is it important that your child wear a mask at school? It's important because we need to protect teachers like John Page. Unfortunately, last week we lost John Page. He was a 47-year-old welding instructor at the Monroe County Area Technology Center, and he passed away due to complications from COVID-19. We're sharing this with you today with the permission of his family. Our welding instructors, our students, our teachers, our staff, they deserve to work and learn in an environment with reduced risk of a disease without a vaccine and without a treatment. And that's why the document that we're releasing today is so important. And that's why I know that our districts and our teachers are going to act in good faith to reopen our schools with these expectations. Next slide, please. I want to leave you with this. Necessary does not always equal easy. The expectations that we're providing today for our schools and how to reopen them safely and reduce the risk, it is not easy. Those recommendations are not easy to implement. They will not be. But they are certainly necessary. We only have 3 major ways to mitigate the risk of COVID-19: wearing a mask, spreading out, and washing hands. Washing hands is generally accepted in our society, and I think our school districts will get support from our communities if they enforce washing hands in our schools. Unfortunately, wearing a mask has become a divisive issue in our Commonwealth and in our country. And so we're going to need everybody in all of our communities to help our schools out, knowing that this is an expectation that needs to happen. As the Commissioner, I'm ultimately responsible to ensure the health and safety of Kentucky's students, and we need to come together as Kentuckians to make those sacrifices, such as wearing a mask and being a little bit further apart from one another. My grandfather was a prisoner of war in World War II, and growing up, I learned the sacrifices of that generation. My other grandfather told me stories of the sacrifices made back on the home front due to the rationing of supplies and gas and tires and automobiles. Much greater sacrifices than wearing this cloth mask with elastic. But here we are today as the children, the grandchildren, and the great-grandchildren of that generation, and we're seeing on social media that somehow is a problem or is controversial. controversial. So as the commissioner charged, at least for a temporary time until I turn this over, please celebrate the unity and the pride of being Kentuckians and join with me and our districts over the next months to model the behavior that we need to see in our schools with our children, and wear a mask and practice safe at home, healthy at home. This is going to keep our schools open, and it's going to reduce the risk, and it is a small sacrifice for our generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. I want to echo Governor Beshear's sentiments about what a wonderful job you've done in really, really difficult times. So thank you for your leadership. Many of you know I'm a former teacher. I spent my life in the classroom, on the basketball court, and as an assistant principal. And so I know the challenges that these schools are going to face as they reopen. And as many people watch today, their parents, students, educators themselves, they're probably thinking, how in the world can we make this work? And the answer is simple. You cannot continue to do things that you used to do and expect to get different results. And so it is because of that that we have the support of the governor, the commissioner of education, and myself as the secretary of education and workforce development, that we are willing to also allow flexibilities to our school districts that will support them in being able to implement these safety expectations for our students. It is not fair to just put new expectations on hundreds and thousands of children that come to the same school building every day without also allowing for our schools to be able to innovate and to be able to change the way they do things in the name of health and safety. And so I want to make sure that we remember as we move forward, this is certainly about keeping our students safe, certainly about keeping our children safe. And many would say, well, COVID-19 doesn't cause death in children as often as it does adults. And that's true. But we also have to remember that we have folks that show up every day to make sure that school is clean when your child walks in. We have folks that show up to school every day to make sure that your child gets breakfast and lunch. We have folks that show up every day and will interact with more people more closely as classroom teachers than probably anyone else in the community, because they value their job, they value education, and they're there to support our children. So this is not just about one group of people. This is truly about our community and making sure that everyone is safe. And this virus does have a face. The governor stands here every day and talks to us as Kentuckians about how many people have contracted the virus and how many lives it's taken from us. And it's certainly taken the lives of folks who work in our school systems. In April, we lost Fayette County school bus driver, Eugenia Weathers, who was only 56 years old, and another 16 employees that she directly worked with also tested positive and were at risk. Grant County Schools lost Garrelyn Stone and Joanne Banks to the virus as well. So it is our duty to protect every child, but it is also our duty to protect every adult and every family member of the folks in those school buildings. So together, the governor and the commissioner and I have come together to help provide the flexibility that is needed by schools to meet these unique circumstances. Today, as the Secretary of Education and Workforce Development, I approved a memorandum that was issued by the Commissioner of Education that temporarily suspends a couple of statutes. First, we're temporarily suspending the 10-day limit on NTI days, so that the Kentucky Board of Education may grant the authority for an unlimited number of NTI days for the 2021 school year. This provides the flexibility to school districts to use NTI as needed for the next school year in the event that they need to close in-person classes as a result of COVID-19 spikes within their own communities. Secondly, we will temporarily suspend a statute that requires average daily attendance be utilized in calculating state funding to school districts for the 2021 school year, so that the Kentucky Board of Education may set forth a funding mechanism similar to what we saw this past session with Senate Bill 177. This provides flexibility to school districts to receive funding in the event that schools need to operate a blended in-person and digital instruction in response to COVID-19. This memorandum addresses the concerns of school districts throughout the state who are planning a variety of instructional methods to best serve the needs of our students and the communities amid the uncertainty we face with COVID-19. Our school districts are developing models that work best for their unique communities, and this memorandum provides the flexibility they requested and they need. Next, I want to make sure that every school district knows that we are pleased to announce the opportunity for our schools to participate in the Expanded Care program. Expanded Care allows schools to bill for services provided to Medicaid-eligible children who fall outside of the IEP, or Individualized Education Plan, allowing schools to provide services to 75% more children than before. This includes a 3-to-1 match by the federal government. So for every dollar that a school system puts in, the federal government kicks in another 3. And the best news is the services that will be provided through this Expanded Care program are school nurses, audiologists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, physical therapists, interpreters, and one that I know we are all desperately in need of in our public schools, and that is mental health professionals. In addition, I would also like to announce that today, under the leadership of Governor Beshear, Kentucky continues to lead the way in our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. As such, I am sending a letter to the Secretaries of Education across the nation, asking them to join Kentucky in calling upon our national leaders, Congress, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, and the President, echoing Governor Beshear's request for an additional round of CARES funding for our state budget. Additionally, because education is a large part of state budgets, I have asked them to join me in requesting the funding necessary to safely reopen schools this fall. The way schools have been funded in the past must evolve with these new educational practices and expectations. Our educators, students, and their families have all adapted to these changing times. Our education funding must too. Reopening schools amid COVID-19 is going to be a very heavy lift for every school in this nation. Our ability to serve the whole child while protecting their health and safety will determine our country's economic resilience on the other side of this pandemic. Now more than ever, it is imperative that we speak with one unified voice on behalf of our students, faculties, staffs, schools, and communities by advocating for the funding and flexibility to provide the necessary protections and deliver essential educational services to our youngest citizens. And to close, I would simply like to say a special thank you to the Jefferson County Public Schools Language Services. With their help, we are going to be able to translate the Healthy at Schools document into the top 5 languages that are spoken in Kentucky in our schools, which will help us to be able to communicate with every family in every community. So thank you.